The picture of the shepherd is well known. The actual Greek contains kalos. I am the beautiful shepherd. And when I was a child, a very dignified and beautiful Christ, as it were, protected me all those growing years over my bed. It is quite unusual, actually, because in a Welsh nonconformist family, one does not go into images in the same way as one would in Ireland. But for some reason, my parents had decided there would be this picture of Christ, the Good Shepherd, and he had around him these little sheep, and he was taking care of one in particular. And if one is growing up from earliest memories under one and only one picture of the face of Christ, particularly beautiful and kind, one identifies in some way Christ with that face. As I was growing up, I was blessed to have human images of that pastor as well. Indeed, the normal way of talking about a minister is gweinidog or bigail. Minister is gweinidog, bigail is shepherd. The same word as pastor, that's what it means. And say what you like, there was that care shown all those growing years and actually beyond. And strangely enough, it's still there. And that is a proof of souls under their own modalities loving and serving Christ with sincerity. Souls who care for other souls. I give one example just to illustrate the point. At the age of 13, there was a strong danger of going completely towards the evangelicals. And the minister picked it up. It was actually my father's minister, that's another question again. But he, at a distance, copped on. This is risky. And as you might say, he'd been there and he knew why. And he sent this message back. If he wants to talk to somebody, send him to me. And I copped on. That is true pastoring. When one cares for even the risk, and one protects somebody who doesn't know all the elements in the equation. It could be your case as well, very easily. Cop on to the signs of providence. Because a word, especially at that age, can direct a whole life. Then, growing up, I perceived that that was precisely what the Lord wanted. When one has to do with the ars artium, the art of arts, that of guiding souls, one has to have what? The heart and indeed the eyes of Christ. One gazes into the depths of a being and loves that being into safety, whatever it might cost. Do you know that there are many times in our life when we can actually change all eternity and save a soul from damnation? It can depend just on us, for some soul, perhaps even today, to make it. One day, years ago, when only a novice actually, at Kilnacrot at the time, not that far from here, we used to have vigils and sessions with many hundreds of people coming to pray. And one of them, I believe it was in honour of Divine Mercy. And for some reason they wanted me to guide the prayers at a certain point, I forget what it was now. But the thought came to me while meditating on one of the intentions of St. Faustina, to pray for a certain category of souls. And I put into it this particular category of souls who right now might do something irreversible, and specifically souls, young souls who might commit suicide this night. And I was trying in that mode of prayer, not preaching because one hasn't got the right to until one is ordained, but to meditate on what it is and what it can be saved from by just a word at the right time. And I happened to mention this towards the end of that little meditation, that it solves no problems, but it might actually add a problem, that of losing one's soul in the process. And that word happened to reach the heart of a young person there who was contemplating actually committing suicide. And later he came to me and said so. Had it not been for that word, it can be your case too. Just the other day, I was giving a retreat, and a person came up to me and said something which was going back a few years. I recognized this person, but I didn't know how. And then I caught on. That person was related to a person they had called me to see miles away. And I remember getting there in a hospital. And that person by then, she would have been quite young actually, and still quite pretty, you could see. By then, could hardly speak. She'd been fulminated very quickly by cancer, in full swing. And all I could do, because she was lucid still, was to ask yes or no, did she want this or that, e.g. absolution. And that little nod of the head was enough for the will to be engaged and for grace to pass. And so, in her lucidity, she received all that the church can give at that moment in cosmic time. At the end of the little session, I just put my lips to her forehead and said, "Safe home." I went away and I got this message on the mobile phone by text the following morning. She'd actually died. But then the other day I got the details. She, being a nurse, had refused morphine because she wanted to remain lucid. An hour after I'd gone, she had consented to have the pump introduced. And by 9 o'clock the following morning, her soul had flown away. And they told me what a huge difference that passage of grace had made to the sister by then having a job to face the issue. Just this week, I was deeply moved by things which were given to me to read by Charles. I leave with one. It was what was happening in the First World War, when precisely it was being multiplied by many hundreds in 1 second, this drama. Do you know that the army chaplains were miraculously preserved quite often? They would run over the trenches in full fire, and something kept them alive, more than they should have been. Eventually, at one stage, the French now, not the British, were taking over one trench from the Germans. And when they got there, they thought it was completely evacuated and empty. But what was not their surprise when they heard further down the trench a murmuring of human voices, one voice, a weak voice. So the officer approached and presumed it was probably a doctor. Immediately, the figure raised up a crucifix, and he realized it was a priest. They had no common language. But this officer realized what was going on before his eyes. This priest had potentially sacrificed his life for one soul left yet in the trench, dying. Because that priest soldier knew that probably if he were caught, he would also be shot, especially perhaps by the French. What happened? The officer had clemency. Let him finish and let him go back to the other side unharmed. And the soldier before him, a few seconds later, closed his eyes and fled with his soul only to safety. Carried precisely on the shoulders of the Good Shepherd, as one sees in the catacombs. It's all about safely home. And we, my friends, have to be very careful that we don't ever let a soul pass through our fingers when God Himself is asking us to say a word in His name. Death comes to everyone. It came even this morning to our sacristan here. Her brother has gone to safety, a good soul. And this morning, as I came back from confession in the parish, I paused a moment going through the cemetery, which is the old monastery, and I happened to see a very recent grave, 2013. And at the end of the inscription, there was a whole verse of very profound thought from Oscar Wilde. I won't quote it, but I'll just leave you with this thought, which I looked for among my archives. Tears, my friends, tears contain more than words. And if one has to do with someone's grief, one has to be reverent and afraid. One treads on people's sorrows at tiptoe, and one waits for the word without putting one's foot in it even more.
Una pioggia di lacrime, a shower of tears. There are some drops too heavy for the world, some molecules not made of powers that be, of matter bound, in soundless orbit hurled upon a proton core charged heavily. There are some sounds that words may not contain, some particles of soul that know a way to come and go, there where a little pain did find a way to be, and nothing say. There are, my friends, some meanings that stand ill upon a syllable, for we are not found all within a sound, and we stand still with little but a trickle ne'er forgot to say what matters most. For most of all, we are, when we are, globules very small.